A quiet diner on the edge of town, a weary single dad and his young daughter grabbing a late breakfast, a struggling waitress with secrets buried beneath her tired smile, and a convoy of black SUVs rolling in with one mission: drag her back to the gilded cage she escaped. What starts as one simple cry, "She's in danger, Dad," ignites a storm of courage that will shake the foundations of wealth, power, and corruption. From the fluorescent lights of a small-town diner to the marble halls of a sprawling estate where money buys silence and fear, this is a story about standing up when the world expects you to look away. Stay with us and discover how one act of defiance can topple an empire built on control, how a waitress finds her voice, and how an unlikely hero proves that true strength isn't measured by bank accounts but by the courage to do what's right. Let's begin. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun broke over Ashford Heights with the kind of golden warmth that promised a perfect Saturday. Cameron Walsh guided his pickup truck down Maple Street, the engine humming steadily as storefronts began opening their doors. Beside him, his 8-year-old daughter Lily pressed her nose against the window, counting the American flags hanging from lampposts. 37, 38, 39. She counted aloud, her voice bright with the kind of energy only a weekend morning could bring. Cameron smiled, his calloused hands steady on the wheel. 5 years since he'd left the Marines. 5 years since he'd become both mother and father to the little girl beside him. Some mornings still felt heavy with that absence, but mornings like this, with sunshine streaming through the windshield and Lily's laughter filling the cab, those mornings felt like grace. "How about we grab breakfast at the Blue Moon?" he suggested, already signaling toward the turn. "I heard they make pancakes as big as your head." Lily giggled, finally pulling away from the window. "Nobody's head is that big, Dad." "Then we'll have to see for ourselves, won't we?" The Blue Moon Diner sat on the corner of 5th and Hawthorne, a throwback to simpler times with its chrome exterior and neon sign that flickered even in daylight. Cameron had passed it 100 times working construction jobs around town, but they'd never stopped in. Today felt like the right day to change that. The bell above the door chimed as they entered, and immediately Cameron's senses took in the space the way they'd been trained to. Old habits from his years in reconnaissance never quite faded. He noted the exits, the number of patrons, the layout, booth seating along the windows, counter stools facing an open kitchen, a hallway leading to restrooms in the back. Only a handful of customers filled the diner this early. An elderly couple sharing coffee and a newspaper in the corner booth. 2 construction workers at the counter, their reflective vests still dusty from a morning job. A businessman typing frantically on his laptop, barely touching his eggs. But it was the waitress who caught Cameron's attention, though not for any reason he could immediately name. She moved through the diner with practiced efficiency, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, her uniform crisp despite the early hour. Something about the way she carried herself spoke of someone trying very hard to remain invisible. Her name tag read Mia, in fading letters. "Sit anywhere you'd like," she called out, her voice friendly but strained, as though maintaining that friendliness cost her something. Cameron guided Lily to a booth by the window, the red vinyl seats creaking as they slid in. Lily immediately grabbed the laminated menu, her eyes growing wide at the pictures of towering pancake stacks and overloaded breakfast platters. "Can I get chocolate chip pancakes?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "It's Saturday," Cameron said with a mock, serious expression. "I think the law requires chocolate chip pancakes on Saturdays." Lily beamed, kicking her feet under the table with excitement. Mia approached their booth, notepad in hand and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Up close, Cameron noticed more details. She was young, mid-20s perhaps, with delicate features that seemed at odds with the exhaustion evident in the shadows under her eyes. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the pen. "Good morning," she said, her voice warmer now. "What can I get started for you folks?" "Chocolate chip pancakes for the lady," Cameron said, winking at Lily. "And I'll take the number 3, with scrambled eggs, wheat toast. Coffee? Mia asked, already reaching for the pot on a nearby warmer. Please. Black. As Mia poured, Cameron noticed a fresh bruise on her wrist, partially hidden by her sleeve. The color was distinctive, the kind that came from a tight grip. She caught him looking and quickly adjusted her sleeve, the smile faltering for just a moment. I'll get this right in for you, she said quickly, retreating toward the kitchen. Lily had already pulled out her coloring book, spreading crayons across the table in organized chaos. She hummed while she worked, completely absorbed in filling a picture of a butterfly with impossible shades of purple and green. Cameron sipped his coffee, his mind working. The bruise bothered him, the way Mia had moved, the tension in her shoulders, the glances she kept throwing toward the door as if expecting someone. He'd seen that look before, in places far from home where fear was a survival mechanism. Dad, look. Lily held up her butterfly, now a riot of colors that somehow worked together perfectly. Do you think butterflies can be any color they want in heaven? Where Mom is? The question, so innocent and sudden, hit Cameron in the chest the way it always did when Lily mentioned her mother. Sarah had been gone 3 years now, cancer taking her too fast and too young, but Lily's memories remained vivid and precious. I think in heaven, butterflies can be anything they want, Cameron said softly, reaching across to touch his daughter's hand. Just like your mom probably has the best garden up there, growing flowers in colors we haven't even invented names for yet. Lily nodded, satisfied, and returned to her coloring. Mia returned with their plates, the pancakes indeed comically large and studded with melting chocolate chips. Lily's eyes went wide with delight. As Mia set down Cameron's breakfast, her hand shook enough that coffee sloshed slightly in the cup. Sorry, she muttered, grabbing a napkin to wipe the small spill. No harm done, Cameron assured her. Then, keeping his voice casual and kind, he added, tough morning. Mia's eyes flicked to his, surprised. For a moment, he saw something in her expression, a war between the desire to confide in someone and the fear that kept her silent. The fear won. Just tired, she said with a forced laugh. Late shift last night, early shift this morning. You know how it is. She hurried away before he could respond, disappearing into the kitchen. Cameron watched her go, that instinct he'd honed over years of dangerous work telling him something was very wrong. He'd learned to trust that instinct. It had saved his life more times than he could count, and it rarely steered him wrong. Dad, your eggs are getting cold, Lily observed, syrup already dripping down her chin. Right, can't have that. He picked up his fork, but his attention kept drifting to the kitchen window where he could see Mia speaking with the cook, her posture defensive, her arms wrapped around herself. The diner's bell chimed again. Cameron glanced up out of habit and immediately felt his body tense. 3 men entered, and everything about them screamed wrong. They wore expensive suits, too formal for a Saturday morning at a small-town diner. 2 of them had the build and bearing of private security, their eyes scanning the room with professional assessment. The third, older and clearly in charge, moved with the confidence of someone used to being obeyed without question. Cameron's trained eye caught the telltale bulges under their jackets. Armed, the older man's gaze swept the diner and locked onto Mia, who had emerged from the kitchen with a fresh pot of coffee. The color drained from her face. The coffee pot slipped from her fingers, shattering on the tile floor in an explosion of glass and hot liquid. The crash made Lily jump, her crayon skittering across the table. It's okay, sweetheart, Cameron said quietly, his hand instinctively moving to rest on the table between them, ready to shield her if necessary. But his eyes never left the 3 men, who were now moving purposefully toward Mia. The waitress backed up until she hit the counter, trapped. Her breath came in short, visible gasps. The older man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Hello, Mia, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the now silent diner. It's time to come home, daughter. The word daughter hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Every customer in the diner had stopped eating, stopped talking, stopped moving. The only sound was the hiss of the griddle in the kitchen and Mia's ragged breathing. Cameron's posture shifted infinitesimally, his muscles coiling with the readiness that came from years of training. He kept his expression neutral, but every sense had sharpened to combat awareness. 3 armed men. 1 clearly the principal, 2 providing security. Professional operation. Civilian environment. Innocent bystanders. Calculate. Assess. Prepare. "I'm not going anywhere with you," Mia said, her voice shaking but defiant. "I told you, I'm done." The older man, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Cameron's truck, took another step forward. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. Everything about him spoke of wealth and power, the kind that believed it could buy anything, including obedience. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Don't make a scene, Mia," he said, his tone measured but edged with steel. "You've had your little adventure. You've proven your point. Now it's time to stop embarrassing the family and return where you belong." "Embarrassing?" Mia's voice cracked. "Is that what you call it? I'm not your property, father. I'm not some asset you can control." One of the security men moved to flank her, cutting off any escape route toward the back. The other positioned himself near the door. Professional. Coordinated. They'd done this before. Cameron caught Lily staring, her brown eyes wide with confusion and growing fear. She might not understand all the words, but she understood the feeling in the room. The electricity of impending violence. "Dad," Lily whispered, her small hand reaching across the table to grip his. "Something's really wrong." "I know, sweetheart," Cameron murmured back. "Stay in your seat. Don't move unless I tell you to." The older man, Mia's father, pulled out his phone with deliberate slowness. "I'm going to call the police," he announced to the diner at large, his voice taking on a rehearsed quality. "My daughter suffers from mental health issues. She's off her medication and not thinking clearly. For her own safety, she needs to come with us to receive proper care." It was smooth, polished. A pre-prepared narrative designed to paint him as the concerned father and Mia as the unstable daughter. Cameron recognized a cover story when he heard one. Mia's face went white. "That's a lie. He's lying. I'm not sick. I'm not." "Mia, please," her father interrupted, his voice dripping with false compassion. "You're only making this harder on yourself. Think about your future. Think about the foundation, the charity work, the family reputation." "I don't care about your reputation." Mia's voice rose, desperation bleeding through. "I care about having a life that's actually mine. I care about not being sold off like cattle to whatever business partner you want to merge with this quarter." The father's expression hardened, the mask slipping for just a moment. "Lower your voice. You're making a spectacle." "Good." Mia shot back, tears now streaming down her face. "Maybe someone should see what you really are." The security man nearest to Mia reached for her arm. "Miss Davis, we need you to come with us. Please, don't make this difficult. Don't touch me." Mia jerked away, but there was nowhere to go. Her back was against the counter, the security men boxing her in. That was when Lily spoke up, her voice small but clear in the tense silence. "She's in danger, Dad." 4 simple words from an 8-year-old, spoken with the absolute certainty that only the young possess, cut through Cameron's tactical assessment and hit him somewhere deeper. He looked at his daughter, saw Sarah's compassion in those eyes, remembered the values he'd promised to instill, the kind of man he'd sworn to be, not just for his daughter, for anyone who needed help. Cameron stood, his chair scraping against the tile floor. Every eye in the diner turned to him. He was 6'2", broad-shouldered from years of physical training and construction work, with the kind of presence that came from having commanded men in combat situations. When he moved, people noticed. "The lady asked not to be touched," Cameron said, his voice level but carrying the weight of command. "I suggest you respect that." The father turned, regarding Cameron with the kind of dismissive glance wealthy men gave to those they considered beneath them. "This is a family matter. It doesn't concern you. When someone asks for help in front of me, it concerns me," Cameron replied, moving into the aisle. He positioned himself with clear sightlines to all three men, his body angled to protect Lily while maintaining mobility. Old instincts, muscle, memory from another life. One of the security men stepped forward, his hand moving subtly toward his jacket. "Sir, step back. This isn't your business." Cameron's eyes locked onto that hand movement. "I can see you're armed," he said quietly. "So let's all stay calm and keep our hands where everyone can see them." The security man's jaw tightened. "Are you threatening us?" "I'm encouraging smart decisions," Cameron said. "You're in a public place. There are witnesses. There are cameras." He gestured to the security system in the corner, its red light blinking steadily. "Whatever you're planning to do, ask yourself if it's worth the consequences." Mia's father laughed, but it was cold and calculated. "Do you have any idea who I am?" "I'm Harrison Westfield. I own half the commercial real estate in this county. I have the mayor on speed dial. I employ 300 people in this town alone." He stepped closer to Cameron, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You're a nobody. A working man in a pickup truck. You don't want this fight." Cameron held his ground. "I've been in fights you couldn't imagine, Mr. Westfield. This wouldn't even rank in my top 100. What I'm offering is a chance for everyone to walk away peacefully. Let your daughter make her own choices. Leave. Come back when you're ready to talk like adults, instead of using intimidation." "Intimidation?" Westfield's face flushed. "I'm trying to protect my daughter from herself. She's thrown away everything. A trust fund worth millions, a position in my company, a future of comfort and security, to work in this." He gestured dismissively at the diner. "This pathetic place for minimum wage. She's clearly not thinking rationally. Maybe she's thinking clearer than she ever has." Cameron countered. "Maybe she finally figured out that comfort and security aren't worth the cost of your soul." The tension in the room ratcheted up another notch. The security man who'd moved toward his weapon now had his hand inside his jacket, hovering. The other had shifted his stance, ready to move. Cameron's combat awareness screamed at him. 3 against 1, armed opponents, civilian environment, his daughter 10 feet away. The odds weren't great, but they weren't impossible either. He'd faced worse in Fallujah. He'd faced worse in Helmand Province. The question wasn't whether he could handle this. The question was whether he was willing to risk Lily seeing violence, exposing her to danger, for a stranger. He looked at Mia, saw the tears streaking her face, saw the bruises on her wrists, saw the desperate hope in her eyes that someone, anyone, would stand up for her. Then he looked at Lily, saw his daughter watching him with absolute trust, believing with every fiber of her being that her father would do the right thing, that heroes existed, that good people helped those in need. Sarah's voice echoed in his memory, from a conversation years ago before she got sick. "Promise me something, Cam. Promise me you'll teach our daughter that strength isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about standing up when it would be easier to sit down." He'd made that promise. Time to keep it. "Last chance, Mr. Westfield," Cameron said quietly. "Walk away. Let your daughter live her own life, or we're going to have a problem." Westfield's expression turned to ice. He nodded once to his security team. "Remove this man from my path," he ordered. The security man's hand came out of his jacket, and Cameron moved. Everything happened in the space between heartbeats. The security man's hand emerged from his jacket, gripping a phone, not a weapon. A bluff, meant to intimidate. But the body language, the aggressive posture, the step forward, those were real. Cameron had milliseconds to decide, de-escalate, or engage. The security man reached for Cameron's shoulder, intending to physically remove him. Big mistake. Cameron's hand shot up, intercepting the grab. His fingers locked around the man's wrist with practiced precision, and he twisted, using the man's own momentum against him. A basic joint lock, taught to every Marine in close-quarters combat. The security man gasped, suddenly off balance. Cameron didn't hurt him, didn't break anything, just redirected the energy and leverage until the man was forced to bend forward or have his elbow hyperextended. In one smooth motion, Cameron guided him past and toward the door, releasing him with just enough force that he stumbled into his partner. "I don't want to hurt anyone," Cameron said, his voice still calm despite the adrenaline now singing through his system. "But I will if I have to." The second security man caught his partner, and both turned back toward Cameron with new respect and wariness. Professional fighters recognized skill when they saw it. These men suddenly understood they weren't dealing with some random civilian who would fold at the first sign of confrontation. Westfield's face had gone purple with rage. "You just assaulted my security personnel. I'll have you arrested. I'll sue you for everything you have." "Your man grabbed me first," Cameron pointed out. "That's battery. I defended myself. That's legal, and it's all on camera." He gestured again to the security system. "So maybe we all need to take a breath and reconsider our choices." The elderly couple in the corner booth had pulled out their phones, recording. The construction workers at the counter had turned fully around, watching with intense interest. The businessman had stopped typing, his finger hovering over what Cameron suspected was 911. Witnesses, documentation. The situation was getting away from Westfield, and he knew it. "Dad." Lily's voice cut through the tension. Small, but steady. "Is the waitress okay?" All eyes turned to Mia, who had slumped against the counter, her hands covering her face as she tried to control her breathing. She was shaking violently, the adrenaline crash hitting her hard. Cameron's expression softened. This wasn't about dominance or winning a confrontation. This was about a scared young woman who needed help. He turned slightly toward her, keeping the security men in his peripheral vision. "Mia," he said gently, "do you want to leave with these men?" She lowered her hands, tears still streaming, but her voice came out stronger than before. "No. I never want to see him again." "You heard her," Cameron said to Westfield. "She's an adult. She's making her choice. Time to respect it." "Respect?" Westfield spat the word like poison. "She's my daughter. Everything she has, everything she is, I gave her. She owes me respect. She owes me obedience." "You don't own people, Mr. Westfield," Cameron said quietly. "Not even your daughter." For a long moment, Westfield stared at Cameron with naked hatred. Then his expression shifted, becoming calculating. He pulled out his phone, this time actually making a call. "Chief Morrison. Harrison Westfield. I need officers at the Blue Moon Diner on Hawthorne. There's a situation. A man has assaulted my security team and is preventing me from collecting my mentally unstable daughter who requires medical attention." "Yes, I'll hold." Cameron felt his jaw tighten. Westfield was playing the long game, using his connections and influence. In a town where he employed hundreds and owned half the commercial property, his word would carry weight. The police would come, and they'd likely side with him initially. But Cameron had faced worse odds. The cook emerged from the kitchen, a heavy-set man in his 60s, with flour on his apron and concern in his eyes. "Mia, honey, you okay?" "She's fine, Frank," Westfield said dismissively. "Once she's properly medicated and under supervision again, she'll be perfectly fine." "I am not crazy," Mia said through gritted teeth. "Tell them, Frank, tell them I've been fine. Tell them I've worked here for 3 months without any problems." Frank nodded slowly. "Girl's been nothing but reliable and kind. Never seen any sign of mental trouble, but I have seen her come in with bruises she tried to hide." His gaze settled on Westfield with clear disapproval. "Funny how those bruises match the width of a man's fingers." Westfield's expression darkened. "Are you accusing me of something, Frank?" "Because I'd be very careful if I were you. This diner operates on land I own. Your lease comes up for renewal in 6 months." The threat hung in the air, naked and ugly. This was how Westfield operated, Cameron realized. Money, influence, intimidation. Anyone who opposed him got crushed under the weight of his power. "You're threatening him now?" Cameron said, his voice hard. "In front of witnesses." "I'm stating facts," Westfield replied smoothly. "Facts about business relationships and market realities. If you hear threats in that, perhaps you're the one with problems." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Cameron's mind raced through scenarios. The police would arrive, they'd take statements, and depending on how much influence Westfield truly had, they might try to force Mia to go with him. She was an adult, but if Westfield pushed the mental health angle hard enough, got a doctor to sign off on an evaluation, he could potentially have her committed for observation. It was a terrifying abuse of power, but Cameron had seen it happen before. Wealthy families using the system to control rebellious members. "Lily," Cameron said quietly. "Come here, sweetheart." His daughter slid out of the booth and hurried to his side. He put his hand on her shoulder, feeling her trembling slightly. This wasn't how he'd wanted their Saturday morning to go, but here they were. "Mia," Cameron said, making a decision. "When the police get here, you stick close to me. You tell them exactly what happened. You tell them you're an adult, making your own choices. You tell them about the bruises. Don't let them intimidate you into going anywhere you don't want to go." "They won't listen," Mia said hopelessly. "You don't understand. My father, he knows everyone. The police chief plays golf with him. The mayor is his college roommate. The district attorney's campaign was funded by his PAC. I'm not fighting one man. I'm fighting an entire system he's built to protect himself. Then we make sure everyone knows it," Cameron said. He turned to the elderly couple, still recording on their phones. "Are you folks getting all this? Every threat? Every admission?" The elderly man nodded. "Every word. And it's uploading to the cloud as we speak, just in case someone tries to confiscate phones." Cameron felt a grim smile tug at his lips. "Smart." 3 police cruisers pulled up outside, their lights painting the diner in alternating red and blue. 4 officers entered, led by a man in his 50s with graying hair and a slight paunch, his uniform crisp but his eyes already dismissive as they swept the scene and landed on Westfield with clear recognition. "Harrison," the officer said with false casualness. "What seems to be the trouble?" "Chief Morrison, thank you for coming so quickly," Westfield said, his entire demeanor shifting to concerned father. "My daughter, Mia, she's off her medication again. She's been working here under an assumed identity, and I've come to bring her home for treatment. This man," he gestured to Cameron, "assaulted my security team when we tried to help her." Morrison's gaze shifted to Cameron, cold and assessing. "That true?" "His security grabbed me first," Cameron said evenly. "I defended myself using minimal force. There are multiple witnesses and video evidence. And Miss Davis is an adult who doesn't want to go with him. That's her right." "Mia's not well," Westfield interjected smoothly. "She hasn't been since. Her mother died 2 years ago. We've tried therapy, medication, everything, but she keeps running away, making poor decisions. I just want my daughter to get the help she needs." It was a masterful performance. Westfield's voice cracked slightly at the mention of his late wife. His expression was painted with paternal concern. If Cameron didn't know better, he might have believed it himself. Morrison turned to Mia. "Miss Westfield, is it true you're off your medication?" "I've never been on medication," Mia said, her voice shaking but determined. "Because I've never needed it. My father is lying. He wants to control me. He's trying to force me into a marriage with his business partner's son. When I refused, he had his people track me down. This is about power, not mental health." Morrison's expression suggested he didn't believe her. "Miss Westfield, your father has documentation from multiple psychiatrists about your condition." "Documentation he paid for," Mia countered, "from doctors on his payroll." The chief sighed. "Why don't we all go down to the station and sort this out properly?" Cameron knew what that meant. Once they got Mia isolated at the station, Surrounded by officers loyal to Westfield, she'd be pressured into voluntarily going for a psychiatric evaluation. And from there, the system would swallow her, unless he stopped it now. Chief Morrison, Cameron said, pulling out his own phone. Before we go anywhere, I think you should know this entire incident has been recorded and is currently being shared on social media. Whatever happens next, it's going to be very public. So I'd suggest you proceed very carefully. The chief's expression hardened. Are you threatening an officer? I'm informing you of facts. Cameron replied calmly. Same way Mr. Westfield was just stating facts earlier. Transparency is important, don't you think? The standoff in the diner stretched for another tense minute before Chief Morrison made his decision. The presence of cameras, recording citizens, and the viral potential of the situation had shifted the calculation. Even in a town where Westfield's influence ran deep, public opinion still mattered. Mr. Westfield, Morrison said carefully, I think it would be best if we all took a step back. Your daughter is an adult. If she doesn't want to accompany you, we can't force her without proper medical documentation and a court order. Westfield's face went rigid with barely contained fury. You're making a mistake, Chief. Maybe. Morrison replied, his tone suggesting he knew exactly whose orders he usually followed. But it's the mistake that keeps me from being on the evening news. Miss Westfield, you're free to go, but I'd advise you to seek legal counsel regarding your father's concerns. Mia nodded shakily, not trusting her voice. Westfield turned his cold gaze on Cameron. This isn't over. I'll remember your face. I'll remember what you did here today. And when I find out who you are, where you work, where you live, you'll wish you'd minded your own business. Is that another threat, Mr. Westfield? Cameron asked mildly, in front of the chief of police. Morrison shifted uncomfortably. Harrison, I think it's time you left. For a long moment, Westfield stared at Cameron with undisguised hatred. Then he straightened his suit jacket, nodded curtly to his security team, and walked out of the diner with the bearing of a man who'd merely lost a battle, not the war. The police followed shortly after, leaving behind a diner full of shaken but relieved customers. Frank immediately locked the door and flipped the sign to closed, then turned to Mia with grandfatherly concern. Honey, why didn't you tell me? He asked. I knew something was wrong, but I had no idea it was this bad. Mia collapsed onto a counter stool, her body finally giving in to the adrenaline crash. Great, shaking sobs racked her frame. Cameron crouched beside her, keeping his voice gentle. You're safe now, he said. Take your time. Lily, who had been remarkably quiet through everything, approached slowly. She held out her stuffed bunny, the one she carried everywhere since her mother died. This is Mr. Hopscotch, she said softly. He helps when I'm scared. You can hold him if you want. Mia looked at the little girl, at the offered comfort, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. She accepted the bunny with trembling hands. Thank you, she whispered. What's your name? Lily. And that's my dad, Cameron. He's really good at helping people. Cameron smiled at his daughter's simple faith, then turned his attention back to Mia. What Frank said is true. Why didn't you tell anyone? There are resources, shelters, legal aid. Mia laughed bitterly. You don't understand. My father is Harrison Westfield. Westfield Development Corporation. He owns 18 buildings in this town alone, has major holdings in 3 counties, sits on the boards of hospitals, universities, charitable foundations. When I first ran away 6 months ago, I tried going to a shelter. Within 24 hours, his people found me. They have private investigators, lawyers, connections everywhere. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, her voice becoming stronger as she spoke. I went to the police in Riverside County, tried to file for a restraining order. The officer I spoke with was polite, took my statement, then called my father directly, said I seemed confused and possibly in need of psychiatric evaluation. I barely got out of the station before his security team arrived. Frank brought over coffee and water, setting them in front of Mia. How did you end up here in Ashford Heights? I stopped using my real name, Mia explained. Started paying cash for everything. No credit cards, no phone with GPS, nothing he could track. I've been working under the table, sleeping in a room above the laundromat on 3rd Street. Mrs. Chen doesn't ask questions, just takes the rent in cash every week. Cameron processed this information with growing anger. This wasn't just an overbearing father. This was systematic stalking and harassment, enabled by wealth and power. You said something about a forced marriage. Mia nodded, clutching the stuffed bunny tighter. Gregory Sutherland. His father owned Sutherland Industries. They manufacture automotive parts. My father wants to merge the companies, and apparently the best way to seal that deal is to marry me off like some medieval alliance. Her voice dripped with contempt. Gregory is 42, divorced twice, with a reputation for being, let's say, difficult with women, but he's worth $300 million, so in my father's eyes, he's perfect. And when you refused? Cameron prompted. My father cut off my access to money, froze my accounts, told everyone in our social circle that I was mentally ill. He had doctors, psychiatrists he pays, write evaluations, declaring me incompetent to make my own decisions. He was building a case to have me declared legally unable to manage my own affairs. The picture that emerged was chilling. A prison built not of walls but of money, influence, and corrupted systems. Cameron had seen authoritarianism in foreign countries, but this was happening right here, in small-town America, hidden behind a veneer of respectability and concern. What about other family? He asked. Your mother, siblings, anyone who could help. Mia's expression crumbled. My mother died 2 years ago. Cancer. She was the only person who understood me, who wanted me to have my own life. After she passed, my father became obsessed with control. He said he couldn't lose me too, that he knew what was best for me. But it wasn't about love or protection. It was about ownership. She took a shaky breath. I have a younger brother, 17, but he's away at boarding school in Switzerland. My father made sure of that, kept us separated, and I have no other close relatives. My father's an only son. My mother's family disowned her when she married him. I'm alone. Not anymore, Lily said with the absolute certainty of youth. You have us now. Cameron met his daughter's eyes and saw the same determination he'd seen in Sarah when she'd decided something was right. His late wife had always been a fierce advocate for the underdog, the person everyone else ignored. She would have done exactly what Lily just did, offered immediate, unconditional support. Lily's right, Cameron said, but we need to be smart about this. Your father isn't going to give up. He'll come back with lawyers, maybe even with medical professionals willing to sign commitments papers. We need a strategy. Mia shook her head helplessly. There is no strategy. He always wins. He has too much power, too many connections. I was stupid to think I could ever really escape. No, Cameron said firmly. You were brave, and brave people don't give up. They adapt, they find allies, they fight smarter. He stood, his mind already working through possibilities. First thing, you can't go back to that room above the laundromat. If your father's investigators are as good as you say, they'll find it soon if they haven't already. I have nowhere else to go, Mia said quietly. Cameron made a decision that he knew would complicate his life considerably but felt absolutely right. You'll come home with us. I have a spare room. You'll be safe while we figure out the next steps. I can't ask you to do that, Mia protested. You have your daughter to think about. My father, he meant what he said. He'll find out who you are, where you work. He'll try to destroy your life. He can try, Cameron said evenly. But I've dealt with worse threats than wealthy bullies. And I'm not letting you face this alone. Frank nodded approvingly. Cameron's right. And I'll help however I can. I might not have Westfield's money, but I've been in this town 40 years. I know people he doesn't, People who care more about doing right than kissing up to power. Mia looked between them, tears forming again, but this time from gratitude rather than fear. I don't understand. You barely know me. Why would you risk so much? Cameron glanced at Lily, who was watching him with pride shining in her young eyes. Because someone I loved very much taught me that courage isn't about the absence of fear. It's about doing what's right even when you're afraid. And right now, the right thing is making sure you're safe. He extended his hand. So what do you say? Will you trust us? Mia hesitated for only a moment before taking his hand. Yes, thank you so much. Don't thank me yet, Cameron said with a slight smile. My cooking is terrible. And Lily hogs the remote during cartoon hours. Hey, Lily protested with a giggle. That's not true. I share. Sometimes. The moment of levity broke some of the tension. And for the first time since the confrontation began, Mia smiled. Genuinely. Smiled. Outside, clouds gathered on the horizon, promising rain. But inside the Blue Moon Diner, 3 unlikely allies had formed a bond that would be tested in ways none of them could yet imagine. Cameron's house sat on the outskirts of Ashford Heights, a modest 2-story with faded blue siding and a porch that needed repairs he kept meaning to get to. The lawn was neatly trimmed, the flower bed Sarah had planted still blooming with late-season roses he tended carefully. It wasn't much, but it was home. Welcome to Walsh Manor, Cameron said with self-deprecating humor as he unlocked the front door. Try not to trip over Lily's art supplies. They have a tendency to migrate throughout the house. Mia stepped inside, taking in the lived-in warmth of the space. Family photos covered one wall, mostly of Cameron, Lily, and a beautiful woman with kind eyes who Mia guessed was the late Mrs. Walsh. Lily's drawings were taped to the refrigerator. A bookshelf overflowed with everything from military history to young adult fantasy novels. The spare room is upstairs, Cameron said, leading the way. It's small, but it has a lock on the door if that makes you feel safer. Fresh sheets are in the closet. Bathroom is across the hall. The room was indeed small but clean, with a single bed, a dresser, and a window overlooking the backyard. Mia set down the small bag Frank had helped her pack from the laundromat room, containing everything she owned in the world now. 3 changes of clothes, a toothbrush, a worn paperback, and a photo of her mother. It's perfect, she said sincerely. More than I could have hoped for. Lily appeared in the doorway. Do you want to see my room? I have a fish named Sir Bubbles. He does tricks. Despite everything, Mia laughed. Fish do tricks. Well, he swims in circles when I tap the glass. Dad says that's not really a trick, but I think it counts. Cameron watched his daughter escort Mia down the hall, chattering about Sir Bubbles and her rock collection and the tree fort he'd built in the backyard. The easy way Lily accepted this stranger into their home reminded him so much of Sarah's open heart. That evening, Cameron made his infamous spaghetti, which consisted of jarred sauce, overcooked pasta, and questionable amounts of garlic bread. They ate at the small kitchen table, and slowly, Mia began to relax. The constant tension she'd carried for months started to ease in the safety of mundane domesticity. So, Cameron said as he cleared the dishes, tomorrow we need to start working on a real plan. I have a friend from my service days, now works as a lawyer in Capital City. She specializes in family law and restraining orders. I'll give her a call, see what our options are. Your father can't just claim you're mentally incompetent without proper legal proceedings, he continued. We'll get ahead of it, file preemptive motions, build a case showing you're perfectly capable of making your own decisions. Mia pushed pasta around her plate. And when he brings out the psychiatrists he's paid off, when he uses his influence to bury any case we file, then we make noise. Cameron said simply, we go public. Media attention is something even men like your father have to respect. Hard to quietly destroy someone when everyone's watching. Over the next few days, a routine developed. Cameron would leave early for his construction job, though he arranged his schedule to be home by mid-afternoon. Mia helped around the house, cooking actual edible meals that made Cameron realize how much he and Lily had been surviving rather than living. Lily taught Mia how to play increasingly complex games of make-believe involving dragons, lost kingdoms, and quests for magical artifacts. In the evenings, Cameron would update Mia on his conversations with his lawyer friend, Jessica Brennan. The news wasn't entirely encouraging. Westfield had indeed been building a legal case, multiple psychiatric evaluations from different doctors, all painting Mia as emotionally unstable and in need of family intervention. But here's the thing, Cameron explained one night after Lily had gone to bed. Jessica found something interesting. 2 of those psychiatrists never actually met with you. Their evaluations were based solely on information provided by your father. That's not just unethical, it's potentially fraudulent. Mia looked up from the book she'd been pretending to read. Would that be enough to discredit the case? It's a start, Cameron said. Jessica is filing complaints with the state medical board. She's also preparing counter-documentation, statements from Frank, from me, from the police report of the diner incident. We're building a picture of a sane, capable woman making informed choices versus a controlling father abusing his power. During the quiet moments, usually while Lily did homework at the kitchen table, Cameron and Mia talked. She told him about her mother, about growing up in a mansion that felt like a museum, about discovering her love for art and literature, passions her father dismissed as impractical. I wanted to go to art school, she admitted one afternoon. Nothing fancy, just the community college program. But my father refused, said I would study business at the university he chose, live in the sorority house he selected, date men from appropriate families. My entire life was a schedule he controlled. Cameron shared his own story, about meeting Sarah at a veterans support group, about her battling cancer with fierce dignity, about learning to be both father and mother to a little girl who asked impossibly hard questions about death and heaven. She made me promise something before she died, Cameron said quietly. She made me promise that I'd teach Lily to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard, that I wouldn't let the world make her cynical or cruel. You're doing a good job, Mia said softly. Lily is, she's remarkable, kind and brave, and so full of love. She gets that from her mother, Cameron said. Then, after a pause, but she's teaching me too. That question she asked in the diner. She's in danger, Dad. I had already decided to help you. But hearing her say it, hearing that certainty in her voice, it reminded me why I made that promise to Sarah in the first place. On the 5th night, while Cameron was grilling burgers in the backyard and Lily was showing Mia her collection of interesting rocks, his phone rang. Jessica Brennan's name flashed on the screen. Cam, we have a problem, Jessica said without preamble. Westfield's lawyers filed an emergency petition this afternoon. They're requesting a psychological evaluation of Mia with the possibility of involuntary commitment if she's deemed a danger to herself. The hearing is in 3 days. Cameron felt his jaw tighten. On what grounds? They're claiming she's exhibited suicidal ideation, that her running away and living in poverty when she has access to wealth and comfort demonstrates irrational thinking. They have an affidavit from a doctor stating she's at risk. That's complete fabrication, Cameron growled. I know, but we need to be prepared. The judge is Philip Hartley. He's known to be friendly with Westfield. Plays in the same country club. Sits on some of the same charity boards. Of course he does, Cameron said bitterly. What do we need? Counter, testimony, character witnesses, any documentation showing Mia's been stable and rational, medical records, if she's seen any doctors recently. And Cam, Jessica's voice turned serious, you need to prepare Mia. This hearing is going to be brutal. They're going to attack her credibility, her choices, her emotions. Westfield's lawyers are top tier, and they won't hold back. After the call ended, Cameron stood in his backyard, watching Lily and Mia laugh over some joke he hadn't heard. The peaceful evening felt suddenly fragile, a bubble about to burst. He'd faced enemy combatants, survived firefights, and led men through impossible situations. But facing down a corrupt system built to protect the powerful, that was a different kind of battle. He wasn't entirely sure how to win. The night before the hearing, Cameron couldn't sleep. He sat on his porch at 2 in the morning, coffee growing cold in his hands, watching the empty street. Everything was too quiet, the kind of quiet that preceded storms. His instincts, honed through years of combat, screamed that something was wrong. The black sedan that rolled slowly past his house confirmed it. No headlights, moving at a crawl, clearly surveilling. Cameron memorized the license plate, noted the silhouettes of at least 2 occupants. They circled the block twice before disappearing into the night. Westfield was watching, preparing. Morning came too quickly. Cameron woke Lily gently, got her ready for school, and drove her himself rather than letting her take the bus. He walked her to the classroom door, knelt down, and looked her in the eyes. "Remember what we talked about," he said quietly. "Stay with your teacher. Don't leave school with anyone except me or Mrs. Patterson next door. If anyone asks you questions about Mia, you don't have to answer. Just say your dad will talk to them." Lily nodded seriously. "Is Mia going to be okay?" "I'm going to make sure of it," Cameron promised, hoping he could keep that promise. He returned home to find Mia already dressed for court in the one professional outfit they'd managed to buy at a thrift store. She looked terrified but determined. "Ready?" he asked. "No," she admitted. "But I don't have a choice, do I?" The courthouse in downtown Ashford Heights was an imposing structure of granite and marble, designed to intimidate. Cameron and Mia met Jessica Brennan on the steps. She was a sharp woman in her 40s, her gray suit professional, her expression concerned. "They've stacked the deck," she said bluntly. "Westfield has 3 lawyers, including Martin Schaefer, one of the best in the state. They've brought Dr. Raymond Carlisle, a psychiatrist with credentials from Harvard, to testify. And Judge Hartley, as I warned you, is going to be biased." "What are our chances?" Cameron asked. Jessica hesitated. "Honestly, 20%. Maybe 30 if Mia testifies well and the Phil Penn's company." Judge has an unexpected moment of conscience. Inside the courtroom, Cameron felt the weight of power assembled against them. Westfield sat at the plaintiff's table, flanked by his legal team, looking every inch the concerned father. His lawyers had stacks of documentation, exhibits, prepared statements. On their side, they had Jessica, a folder of witness statements, and the truth. It didn't feel like enough. Judge Hartley entered, an older man with silver hair and an expression of practiced neutrality that didn't quite hide his sympathies. The hearing began with Westfield's lawyer, Martin Schaefer, presenting their case with surgical precision. "Your Honor, we're here because of a father's desperate concern for his daughter's well-being," Schaefer began. "Harrison Westfield has watched his only daughter spiral into self-destructive behavior following the tragic death of her mother. Despite his best efforts to provide support, therapy, and care, Miss Westfield has repeatedly run away, living in squalor, working menial jobs, exhibiting clear signs of depression and irrational decision-making." He presented the psychiatric evaluations, each one damning. Cameron watched Mia's hands tremble as her entire life was reduced to clinical language about delusions, oppositional behavior, and risk assessment. Then Dr. Carlisle took the stand, his testimony polished and authoritative. He'd never met Mia, but spoke with absolute certainty about her psychological state based on the reports and her father's accounts. "In my professional opinion," Carlisle concluded, "Miss Westfield is experiencing a dissociative episode brought on by unresolved grief. She requires inpatient treatment before she harms herself." Jessica cross-examined aggressively, pointing out that he'd never actually evaluated Mia, that his entire assessment was based on second-hand information, that 2 of the reports he referenced were from doctors under investigation for ethical violations. But Carlisle remained unshakable, his credentials providing armor against doubt. Then it was their turn. Jessica called Frank to testify about Mia's behavior at the diner, her reliability, her clear mental faculties. She called Cameron, who described the confrontation, the threats, the bruises on Mia's wrists. But Schaefer dismantled their testimony with practiced ease. Frank was a simple diner owner, clearly out of his depth in psychological matters. Cameron was a construction worker, with no medical training, letting emotion cloud his judgment, perhaps even hoping for romantic involvement with a vulnerable young woman. That insinuation made Cameron's jaw clench, but Jessica had warned him to stay calm, to not react. Finally, Mia took the stand. Cameron watched her walk to the witness box, her shoulders back, her chin raised. She might be terrified, but she wasn't going to show it. "Miss Westfield," Judge Hartley said, his tone paternalistic, "why don't you tell us in your own words what's been happening?" Mia took a breath. "I left my father's house because I was being treated like property, not a person. He decided who I would marry, where I would work, how I would live. When I refused to marry a man I didn't love, he threatened to have me declared incompetent. Everything he's doing now, he's been planning for months." "Your father says he's concerned about your mental health," Hartley said, "that you've been behaving erratically." "What he calls erratic, I call autonomous," Mia replied. "I chose to work an honest job and live simply, rather than be controlled. That's not mental illness, Your Honor. That's freedom." Schaefer rose for cross-examination, and Cameron braced himself. "Miss Westfield, isn't it true that you abandoned a trust fund worth over $3 million? "I didn't abandon it. I chose not to access it because it came with strings attached. Strings being your father's reasonable expectation that you contribute to the family business and maintain certain social obligations. Strings being total control over every aspect of my life." Schaefer's smile was sharp. "And you believe working for minimum wage, living in a room above a laundromat, that's a rational choice for someone with your resources?" "It's my choice," Mia said firmly. "That's what matters." "Or is it possible," Schaefer said smoothly, "that your judgment is impaired? That grief over your mother's death has left you unable to make sound decisions?" "My grief is real," Mia said, her voice catching. "But it doesn't make me incompetent. It makes me human." The questioning continued for another 20 minutes, Schaefer chipping away at Mia's credibility, painting her as delusional, self-destructive, in need of intervention. By the time he finished, Cameron could see the doubt in Judge Hartley's expression. This was going badly. Jessica did her best in redirect, highlighting the contradictions in the psychiatric reports, emphasizing Mia's clear testimony and rational explanations. But the damage was done. Judge Hartley called a brief recess to consider his decision. Cameron and Mia sat in the hallway, the weight of impending defeat pressing down on them. "I'm sorry," Mia whispered. "This is all my fault. I should have just stayed hidden, not dragged you into this." "Don't," Cameron said firmly. "You did nothing wrong. This system is rigged, but that doesn't mean we stop fighting." Jessica emerged from a conversation with the bailiff, her expression grim. "Hartley's going to rule in Westfield's favor. He's going to order a 30-day psychiatric evaluation at Pinehaven Institute." "That's one of my father's facilities," Mia said, her face going white. "He's on the board. Once I'm in there, I'll never get out. He'll keep me medicated, compliant, until I agree to whatever he wants." Cameron felt rage building in his chest, the same cold fury he'd felt in combat when missions went sideways and lives hung in the balance. But this wasn't a battlefield where he could fight his way out. This was a system designed to crush people like Mia under the weight of money and influence, unless he changed the game entirely. "Jessica," Cameron said slowly, an idea forming. "What if we had evidence of criminal behavior? Real, documented proof that Westfield isn't a concerned father, but a criminal, using the legal system to cover his tracks." Jessica frowned. "What kind of evidence?" "I don't know yet," Cameron admitted. "But men like Westfield, they don't build empires without breaking rules. There has to be something, somewhere. We just need to find it. Cam, we have hours, not days. The judge is going to rule this afternoon." Cameron stood, Decision made. Then we better work fast. Cameron made 3 phone calls in rapid succession. The first was to his neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, asking her to pick up Lily from school and keep her for the evening. The second was to Frank at the diner, requesting any information about Westfield Development Corporation's business dealings in town. The third was to someone he hadn't spoken to in almost 2 years. "This is Mitchell Rhodes," answered a gruff voice with a hint of southern drawl. "Mitch, it's Cameron Walsh. I need a favor, and I need it fast." There was a pause, then a low chuckle. "Walsh, been a long time. Last I heard you were playing house carpenter somewhere in the sticks. What kind of favor are we talking about?" Mitchell Rhodes had been Cameron's commanding officer during his final deployment, a man with connections that ran deep through both military and civilian intelligence networks. After retiring, Mitch had started a private investigation firm specializing in corporate fraud and white-collar crime. "I need a full workup on Harrison Westfield, Westfield Development Corporation, financial records, business partners, anything that smells wrong. And I need it in 3 hours." 3 hours? Mitch whistled. "That's not a favor. That's a miracle." "What's this about?" Cameron explained the situation in brief, clinical terms. Mitch listened without interrupting, and when Cameron finished, the former officer's tone had turned serious. "Westfield, yeah, I know that name. His company has been on a few watch lists. Nothing concrete, but whispers. Suspicious land deals, zoning changes that benefited his properties right after he made political donations, construction permits approved in record time. The kind of pattern that suggests someone's greasing wheels. Can you prove it?" Cameron asked. "Maybe. Let me make some calls. I have a contact at the State Attorney General's office, someone who's been looking for an excuse to investigate Westfield for years but never had enough to justify it. If your Mia can provide insider information, that might be the leverage we need." Cameron turned to Mia, who had been listening intently. "Did you ever see anything suspicious? Financial documents, conversations about bribes, anything illegal?" Mia's eyes widened as memories surfaced. "The ledgers. My father kept 2 sets of books in his home office. I saw them once when I brought him coffee late at night. He was furious that I'd entered without knocking, made me leave immediately. But I saw enough to know one set of numbers didn't match the other." "That's accounting fraud," Jessica said, suddenly energized. "If we can prove he's been cooking his books, that opens up a whole investigation. Tax evasion, potentially wire fraud, securities fraud if the company has investors." "But how do we access those ledgers?" Mia asked. "They're in his private office at the mansion. Security everywhere. Cameras. Guards." Cameron's mind was already working through the problem tactically. "Does he still keep the same security schedule, you remember?" "I think so. He's a creature of habit. Guards change shifts at 6 in the evening. There's a 15-minute window during the transition when coverage is lighter. And I know the security codes, at least I did 6 months ago. He might have changed them." "Only one way to find out," Cameron said. Jessica held up her hands. "Wait, are you suggesting breaking into Harrison Westfield's home? That's illegal. I can't be part of this conversation." "Then don't be," Cameron said. "Go back to court. Stall the judge. File motions. Do whatever lawyers do. Buy us time. Cam, if you get caught, it's breaking and entering. Possibly burglary. You could go to prison. If I don't try, Mia gets locked away in a facility where her father controls everything. I'll take my chances." Jessica looked between them, clearly torn between professional ethics and moral imperative. Finally, she sighed. "I can maybe get us a 2-hour delay. After that, Hartley will issue the order with or without us present. Do not get caught." She left to return to the courthouse, leaving Cameron and Mia in his truck outside the municipal building. "You don't have to do this," Mia said quietly. "This is my fight, My mess. You've already done more than anyone could ask. Cameron started the engine. My late wife used to say that injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. I never fully understood what she meant until I watched powerful people abuse systems designed to protect the vulnerable. Your father isn't just hurting you. He's corrupting everything he touches. Someone needs to stop him. They drove to Westfield's estate on the northern edge of town, a sprawling property behind iron gates. The mansion itself was a monument to excess, all white columns and manicured grounds. Cameron parked down the road, hidden by trees, and studied the property through binoculars. Security camera on the main gate, he noted. 2 more on the corners of the house. Guard stationed by the entrance. This isn't going to be easy. Maya pointed to the eastern edge of the property. There's a service entrance the landscaping crews use. It has a keypad lock, but the code is simple. My father never thought anyone would try to break in, because who would dare? Someone who's tired of watching bullies win, Cameron replied. They waited until the sun began its descent, shadows lengthening across the grounds. At precisely 6 o'clock, Cameron watched through the binoculars as the security shift changed, guards converging at the station for handoff briefings. Now, he said. They moved quickly through the trees, staying low. Mia punched in the code at the service gate, her fingers trembling. The light blinked green, and the lock clicked open. They were in. Inside, the mansion was exactly as Mia remembered. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, artwork worth more than most people's homes. They moved silently through hallways, Mia leading the way to her father's private office on the 2nd floor. The door was locked, but Cameron had come prepared with a basic lockpick set, skills he'd learned during tactical training. The lock gave way in under a minute. Inside, the office was a shrine to wealth and power. Framed photos with politicians and celebrities. Awards from business organizations. A desk that probably cost more than Cameron's truck. Mia went straight to a cabinet behind the desk. He kept them here, in the false bottom drawer. She pulled the drawer fully out, revealing a hidden compartment underneath. Inside were 3 leather-bound ledgers and several USB drives. Cameron's phone buzzed. A text from Mitchell Rhodes. Found your smoking gun. Westfield's been involved in a bid-rigging scheme with city contracts. Have witness statements from contractors he threatened. Also evidence of campaign finance violations and possible tax fraud. Send whatever you find, and I'll package it for the AG. Cameron photographed every page of the ledgers with his phone, the camera capturing the dual accounting systems, the payments marked as consulting fees that clearly went to public officials. The shell companies used to hide income. We've got him, Cameron said, uploading the photos to a secure server Mitchell had provided. This is enough to trigger a full investigation. Not quite, said a voice from the doorway. They spun to find Harrison Westfield standing there, flanked by 2 security guards, both armed. His expression was cold fury, barely contained beneath a veneer of civility. You know, I almost admired your tenacity, Mr. Walsh, Westfield said. But breaking into my home? You've just committed a felony. And now I have you both exactly where I want you. One of the guards reached for his radio, clearly about to call the police. Cameron's mind raced through options. They were trapped, caught red-handed, and Westfield's version of events would be believed over theirs, unless they changed the narrative right now. Go ahead, call the police, Cameron said calmly. Call them and explain why you have 2 sets of financial books. Explain the bribes to city officials. Explain the shell companies. Westfield's smile didn't waver. You have no proof. That phone will be confiscated as evidence of your crime. Those files will disappear. And you'll spend the next 5 years in prison while my daughter receives the treatment she desperately needs. Actually, we do have proof, Cameron said. Every photo I took uploaded automatically to a secure cloud server. My associate has already forwarded them to the State Attorney General's office. Even if you destroy my phone, even if you make us disappear, the evidence is already in the hands of people you can't control. For the first time, Uncertainty flickered across Westfield's face. "You're bluffing." Cameron's phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen, then held it up so Westfield could see. A message from Mitchell Rhodes. "AG's office is requesting immediate freeze on all Westfield development accounts pending investigation. Federal warrants being prepared." "You did it." The color drained from Westfield's face. In that moment, his carefully constructed world began to crumble. The power he'd wielded for decades, the influence he'd bought and paid for, none of it could stop what was coming. "You have no idea what you've done," Westfield said, his voice low and dangerous. "The people I know, the favors I'm owed, I will bury you." "Maybe," Cameron said, "but you'll do it from a federal prison. Guards, I suggest you step aside. This man is about to be arrested for multiple felonies, and you don't want to be charged as accessories." The guards looked at each other, uncertain. Whatever loyalty Westfield had bought was worth less than their own freedom. Outside, sirens began to wail, growing closer. The next 30 minutes unfolded with the controlled chaos of a system finally working as it should. 3 unmarked sedans pulled up to Westfield's mansion, followed closely by squad cars from the county sheriff's office. Federal agents in dark suits emerged, led by a woman in her 50s who introduced herself as Special Agent Victoria Hartwell from the State Attorney General's Public Corruption Unit. "Mr. Walsh? Miss Davis?" she said, her tone professional, but not unkind. "We've been building a case against Harrison Westfield for 18 months. Your evidence just gave us everything we needed for arrests and seizures. We'll need full statements from both of you." Harrison Westfield stood in his own foyer, watching his world collapse with the stunned expression of a man who'd always believed himself untouchable. Federal agents moved through his home with search warrants, boxing up files, computers, and documents. "This is outrageous," Westfield sputtered, his composure finally cracking. "I demand to speak with my attorney. I demand to speak with the governor. Do you have any idea who I am?" "Yes, Mr. Westfield," Agent Hartwell said, calmly. "You're someone who's been bribing city officials, rigging contract bids, and committing tax fraud on a massive scale. You have the right to remain silent, and I strongly suggest you exercise it." As agents handcuffed Westfield, he locked eyes with Mia. For a moment, Cameron saw something flicker in the older man's expression. Not remorse, but something closer to disbelief that his own daughter had been instrumental in his downfall. "You've destroyed everything," Westfield said to her. "The family name, the business, your own inheritance. For what?" "To prove a point." Mia stepped forward, and Cameron noticed her hands were no longer shaking. The fear that had defined her for months had been replaced by something harder, stronger. "No, Father," she said quietly. "To prove that people matter more than power. That family should be built on love, not control. You taught me a lot about what wealth can buy, but you never understood that some things, the most important things, can't be purchased." "Sentimental nonsense," Westfield spat. "You'll regret this. You'll be left with nothing." "I'll be left with my freedom," Mia replied. "That's worth more than everything you have." As agents led Westfield to a waiting vehicle, Cameron's phone rang. Jessica Brennan's voice was breathless with excitement. "Judge Hartley just dismissed the petition. Completely." He saw the news alerts about Westfield's arrest and suddenly developed a conscience. "The psychiatric evaluation is canceled. Mia's free." Cameron relayed the news to Mia, whose legs suddenly gave out. She sat down hard on the mansion's marble steps, great heaving sobs shaking her frame. But these were different tears, not fear or desperation, but relief so profound it overwhelmed every other emotion. Cameron sat beside her, giving her space to process everything. Agent Hartwell approached, notepad in hand. "We'll need comprehensive statements," she said. "Everything you know about his business dealings, Miss Davis. Names, dates, transactions." You're going to be a key witness in what will likely be one of the biggest corruption cases this state has seen in decades." Mia wiped her eyes and nodded. "I'll tell you everything. Every dirty deal, every bribe, every threat I heard him make. All of it." The investigation, as it unfolded over the following hours, revealed a scope of corruption that shocked even seasoned federal agents. Westfield hadn't just bribed local officials. He'd created an entire network of influence peddling that stretched across 3 counties. City councilors, zoning board members, even a state senator were implicated in the scheme. His company had rigged bids for public projects, undercut competitors through illegal means, and systematically defrauded taxpayers of millions of dollars. The 2 sets of books Mia had discovered showed years of tax evasion and money laundering. But perhaps most damning were the recordings found in his office, insurance policies he'd kept against the officials he'd corrupted, conversations where bribes were discussed explicitly, threats made, favors traded. In trying to protect himself, Westfield had created the evidence that would destroy him. By the time Cameron and Mia left the mansion, night had fallen completely. News vans lined the street, cameras capturing footage of the mansion now swarming with federal agents. This would be front-page news, the fall of one of the region's most prominent businessmen. Cameron drove them back to his house in silence, both too emotionally exhausted for conversation. They arrived to find Mrs. Patterson and Lily waiting on the porch, the older woman's expression relieved when she saw them. "Lily's been worried sick." "Mrs. Patterson said, "Saw the news about that Westfield fellow getting arrested." "That the same man from the diner?" "Same one," Cameron confirmed. "It's over now." Lily ran to her father, then surprised everyone by hugging Mia tightly. "You're safe now, right? The bad man can't hurt you anymore?" Mia knelt down to Lily's level. "Thanks to your dad, I'm safe. Thanks to you, too, for asking that question in the diner. You saved my life. That's what heroes do," Lily said matter-of-factly. "They help people." That night, after Lily was asleep, Cameron and Mia sat on his porch with coffee, watching the stars emerge in the clear sky. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a strange calm, the kind that comes after surviving something that should have destroyed you. "What happens now?" Mia asked. "To me, I mean, my father's accounts will be frozen, his assets seized. I don't have access to any money, no job anymore since I can't go back to the diner without attracting attention. Now you figure out who you are when no one's controlling you," Cameron said. "You build a life that's actually yours. It won't be easy, but nothing worth doing is." "I don't even know where to start," Mia admitted. "Same place everyone starts," Cameron said with a slight smile. "One day at a time. One choice at a time. You wanted to go to art school, right? There are community programs, scholarships for adults returning to education. You wanted to help people. There are advocacy groups for domestic abuse survivors who could use someone with your experience." Mia looked at him thoughtfully. "You really believe I can do this? Build something real?" "I've seen you stand up to armed men in a diner," Cameron said. "I've seen you testify in court against your own father. I've seen you risk everything for the chance to be free. Yeah, I believe you can do anything you set your mind to." She smiled, genuine warmth breaking through the exhaustion. "Thank you, Cameron, for everything. For not walking away when it would have been easier." "Walking away isn't easier," Cameron said. "It just feels like it in the moment. Living with yourself afterward, that's the hard part. Sarah taught me that." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the weight of the day slowly lifting. Inside, through the window, they could see Lily's nightlight glowing softly in her room, a beacon of innocence in a world that had tried hard to be cruel. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more complications. Federal prosecutors would need extensive testimony. Media attention would be invasive. Westfield's legal team would fight back with everything they had, even from behind bars. But tonight, justice had won a rare and genuine victory. A corrupt man had fallen. A trapped woman had found freedom. And a little girl had learned that heroes weren't just in storybooks. Sometimes, they were just ordinary people who refused to look away when someone needed help. The trial of Harrison Westfield became the most closely watched legal proceeding in the state's recent history. Media coverage was relentless, with legal analysts dissecting every motion, every witness, every revelation of corruption that emerged from testimony and seized documents. Mia proved to be the prosecution's star witness. Over 3 days on the stand, she detailed years of witnessing illegal activity, her father's brazen confidence that his wealth and connections made him immune to consequences. She described the culture of fear he'd created, not just within his family, but throughout his business empire, where employees who questioned ethics were systematically removed. Defense attorneys tried to paint her as a bitter daughter seeking revenge, but the documented evidence supported every claim she made. The ledgers, the recordings, the testimony of officials he'd bribed, all of it built an overwhelming case. Cameron attended every day of the trial, sitting in the gallery with Lily beside him during school breaks. His daughter watched with solemn attention as justice, slow and methodical, ground forward. She didn't understand all the legal terminology, but she understood the fundamental truth: bad people couldn't hide forever, especially when good people had the courage to shine light on their actions. The verdict came after 6 hours of deliberation. Guilty on 17 counts, including bribery, conspiracy, tax evasion, and racketeering. The courtroom erupted in murmurs as the jury foreman read each count, Westfield's expression growing more ashen with each proclamation. Sentencing came 2 months later. The judge, a federal appointee with no connection to Westfield's network of influence, handed down 12 years in federal prison. With parole restrictions on corruption charges, Westfield would serve at least 10 years before even being considered for release. "You betrayed the public trust for personal enrichment," the judge said from the bench. "You corrupted public officials, defrauded taxpayers, and abused your position of influence. This sentence reflects the severity of your crimes and sends a message that no one, regardless of wealth or status, is above the law." As marshals led Westfield away, he looked back once at Mia. She met his gaze steadily, no longer the frightened young woman who'd hidden in a diner uniform. Whatever hold he'd once had over her had been broken completely. The ripple effects of the case extended far beyond Westfield himself. The state senator implicated in the scheme resigned and later pleaded guilty to lesser charges. 3 city councilors were removed from office. The city's procurement process underwent complete reform, with new oversight and transparency measures. Westfield Development Corporation filed for bankruptcy, its assets sold off to pay restitution to the various municipalities it had defrauded. The proceeds were substantial, funding new public works projects and educational programs throughout the region. For Mia, the trial's end meant finally being able to move forward, with assistance from victim advocacy groups and a settlement from a civil suit against her father's estate. She enrolled in the community college's art program. Her work, deeply personal pieces exploring themes of freedom, captivity, and rebirth, quickly gained recognition. 6 months after the trial, a local gallery approached her about mounting a small exhibition. The opening night drew an impressive crowd, not because of the notoriety of her last name, but because the work itself was striking, raw, and honest. Cameron and Lily attended, dressed in their Sunday best. Lily spent the evening studying each painting intently, asking questions about color choices and what certain symbols meant. Mia answered each query with patience and genuine interest, having discovered a gift for explaining art to young minds. "This one's my favorite," Lily declared, pointing to a canvas depicting a bird breaking free from a golden cage, wings spread wide against a sunrise sky. "Because it's about being brave." "You're right," Mia said, kneeling beside her. "It's called Morning Flight. I painted it the day after your dad helped me. When I finally understood, I didn't have to be trapped anymore." The local newspaper ran a feature on Mia's exhibition, but the article focused on her art and advocacy work rather than her father's crimes. She'd begun speaking at domestic abuse support groups, sharing her story to help others recognize that abuse wasn't always physical, that control and manipulation were their own forms of violence. Wealth doesn't prevent abuse, she told one group. Sometimes it just makes it harder to recognize and easier to hide. If my story helps even one person find the courage to leave a toxic situation, then everything I went through will have been worth it. Her advocacy caught the attention of a state legislator working on reform to mental health commitment laws, closing loopholes that allowed wealthy families to weaponize psychiatric evaluations against relatives. Mia testified before a legislative committee, and her testimony proved instrumental in passing new protections. Cameron watched her transformation with quiet pride. The frightened waitress from the Blue Moon Diner had become a confident advocate, artist, and educator. She'd taken her pain and transformed it into purpose, exactly as Sarah had always believed people could if given the chance and support. Frank reopened the Blue Moon Diner with renewed energy. The publicity from the case had brought in curious customers, and he'd used the opportunity to expand his menu and hire additional staff. He offered Mia a part-time position if she ever wanted it, not out of obligation but genuine fondness for her work ethic and kind nature. "I might take you up on that," Mia said when he made the offer. "Nothing fancy. Maybe weekend breakfast shifts. I miss the routine, the interaction with regular customers. It grounds me." 1 year after the diner confrontation, on a Saturday morning remarkably similar to that fateful day, Cameron, Lily, and Mia returned to the Blue Moon for breakfast. They slid into the same booth where everything had started, the vinyl seats creaking in familiar welcome. Frank brought over pancakes and coffee without being asked, a broad smile on his weathered face. "On the house," he said. "Anniversary special." "Anniversary of what?" Lily asked through a mouthful of chocolate chips. "The day we all learned what real courage looks like," Frank said, winking at Cameron. The local television station had requested an interview, wanting to do a follow-up piece on where everyone was 1 year later. Mia had agreed, hoping it might inspire others facing similar situations. The reporter, a young woman named Elena, arrived mid-morning with a camera crew. "What would you say to someone trapped in a controlling relationship?" Elena asked during the interview. "What advice would you give?" Mia thought for a moment, then looked at Cameron and Lily. "I'd tell them that freedom is worth fighting for, but you don't have to fight alone. There are good people in the world, people who will stand up for you even when they barely know you. Sometimes all you need is the courage to ask for help and the wisdom to accept it when it's offered." "And to the person who helped you," Elena turned to Cameron, "what made you decide to get involved?" Cameron glanced at his daughter, remembering her simple question that had changed everything. "My little girl asked if we could help. The answer to that question will always be yes, whenever I'm able. That's what community means, what being human means. We help each other." The interview aired that evening to positive response. Several organizations reached out to Mia about speaking engagements. A publisher expressed interest in her writing a memoir. Opportunities were opening, the kind that came from genuine achievement rather than family connections. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came later that week, when Mia stopped by Cameron's house for their regular Tuesday dinner. These meals had become tradition, a found family gathering around a table to share food and conversation. As they cleaned dishes, afterward, Lily practicing piano in the background, Mia turned to Cameron with tears in her eyes. "What's wrong?" he asked with concern. "Nothing's wrong," she said, smiling through the tears. "For the first time in my life, everything is right. I'm free. I'm building something that's mine. I have people who care about me, not for what I can provide, but for who I am. I never thought this was possible." Cameron dried his hands and faced her fully. "You made it possible. We just gave you the space to become who you were meant to be." Outside, the sun set over Ashford Heights, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. Inside Cameron's modest home, 3 people who'd found each other in the midst of crisis continued building something more lasting than wealth or power could ever create. They were building a life based on kindness, courage, and the simple truth that standing up for what's right will always matter more than standing aside for what's easy. 18 months after that rainy confrontation in the Blue Moon Diner, The Ashford Heights Community Center hosted an event that brought together everyone whose lives had intersected during those turbulent days. The occasion was the launch of the Freedom Project, a nonprofit organization Mia had founded with settlement funds from her father's estate. Its mission was to provide legal assistance, housing support, and educational scholarships to individuals escaping controlling or abusive family situations. The center's main hall filled with supporters, advocates, and survivors. Cameron stood near the back with Lily, now 9 years old and growing more like her mother every day, watching as Mia took the stage to address the crowd. "A little over a year ago, I was hiding," Mia began, her voice steady and clear. "Hiding from a father who believed love meant ownership, hiding from a system designed to protect power instead of people, hiding from my own potential because I'd been taught that wanting freedom was selfish." She paused, her eyes finding Cameron in the crowd. Then a little girl asked a simple question that changed everything. She asked her father if they could help a stranger in trouble, and he said yes. The audience applauded, many turning to look at Cameron and Lily. Cameron felt his daughter's hand slip into his, her grip proud and firm. "The Freedom Project exists because I learned that courage is contagious," Mia continued. "When one person stands up, others find the strength to stand with them. We've already helped 23 individuals leave toxic situations, provided legal representation for 12 custody cases, and funded educational programs for 37 people seeking to rebuild their lives." More applause. Louder this time. Mia smiled, and Cameron noticed how different she looked from that terrified waitress. Confidence radiated from her now. The kind that came from surviving the worst and discovering you were stronger than you'd ever imagined. After the speeches, as people mingled over refreshments, Frank approached Cameron with his characteristic warm grin. "Never thought that morning in my diner would lead to all this," he said. "Shows what happens when good people refuse to look away. Shows what happens when someone finds their purpose." Cameron replied, watching Mia speak animatedly, with a group of young women, all of them survivors, who'd found hope through her organization. Later, as the evening wound down, Mia joined Cameron and Lily on the center's outdoor patio. The spring air was mild, carrying the scent of blooming flowers from the community garden nearby. "Thank you for coming," Mia said, settling into a chair beside them. "It means everything to have you both here." "Wouldn't have missed it," Cameron said. "You've built something remarkable." "We built it," Mia corrected gently. "None of this happens without that morning, without your willingness to help a stranger." Lily, who'd been quietly drawing in her sketchbook, looked up. "Miss Mia, are you happy now?" The question, so innocent and direct in the way only a 9-year-old could ask, made Mia smile. "Yes, sweetheart, I really am. For the first time in my life, I get to decide what happiness looks like. And it looks like this: helping others, creating art, spending time with people I care about." She glanced at Cameron, something unspoken passing between them. Over the months, their friendship had deepened, built on shared experience and mutual respect. Neither had rushed into anything more, both understanding that some connections needed time to grow naturally. "What about you?" Mia asked. "Are you happy?" Cameron looked at his daughter, at her sketches of butterflies and sunrises, at the way she'd grown into someone who asked questions like her mother and stood firm like both her parents. He thought about the life they'd built together, the unexpected family they'd formed with Mia, the quiet satisfaction of knowing he'd kept his promise to Sarah. "Yeah," he said simply, "I am." Above them, stars began to emerge in the deepening twilight, each one a pinpoint of light against the darkness. Inside the community center, laughter and conversation continued, the sound of people finding hope and connection. The storm that had brought them together had long since passed, but the bonds it forged remained unbreakable. 3 lives, intersecting by chance and changing by choice, had created ripples that would continue spreading outward. One question, one act of courage, one decision to help, had transformed everything. And as night settled over Ashford Heights, that transformation promised to keep expanding, touching lives not yet known, inspiring courage not yet born. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but hopeful, built on the simple truth that kindness, when acted upon, has the power to change the world one person at a time. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.